I wanted to open this up to questions, things you may hear. I don't know that I'll have the answer, but I'll certainly try to answer. In the back first.
Yeah, has the price of land increased in value, even though the mineral rights have been sold, or are they holding steady, or they dropped? Can you have any idea?
Land itself or land with the mineral
With
rights?
or without?
That's a great question. It's held steady. If you wanted to go buy land today, you could. Dave and I were talking in the back before the meeting. Ironically, and this kind of surprised me, if you wanted to go buy land in Susquehanna County, you could buy it. If you wanted to buy mineral rights without the land, someone would probably sell you that as well. And you say, well, why would they do that with everything going on? Well, if you're 75 years old or 80 years old and you know that maybe you're not in an area that's been developed yet, it doesn't look like there's going to be anything going on anytime soon, maybe your kids can't afford it, or you don't have kids, you're going to cash out and go to Boca Raton, you're going to sell. But I would say the average that I see for land with mineral rights is, that's still around that $9,000 or $10,000 an acre number. Land isn't worth any more than it ever was, but now you're having to pay for what? For something that's now below your land that you didn't know was there before, and that's the mineral interest. So if you're going to try to just sell your land without, you're probably looking to, again, it depends on the amount of acres, 15 versus 150. But that $3,000, $4,000 an acre number probably is what we're seeing.
Are the assessors raising the local assessments?
I don't know that I'm the best person to answer that. I haven't seen anything, that's led me to believe that that's the case. I think there's still, you mean like on a house or just on land? Yeah, I'm not seeing it in the housing area. And as far as land, I don't think so. Not that I've seen anyway. You had a question?
Bill, do you know of any clients that have had their water wells ruined, in terms of negative aspects? Has anybody said my water's been, ruined?
Well, two questions. Do I know anyone? No. Has anyone said that it's been ruined? Yes. Being close to that, I do keep an eye on that. I have 4 children. While I'm admittedly in favor of natural gas development, because I know what a game changer it is for the people in the communities in which we live, I, like anyone else, have concerns about the environmental side. But I got to tell you, it's to their advantage to do things the right way. It just is. It's too expensive not to. I have a very good friend that has an environmental consulting business, and his business, of course, is really grown because he does some work for the gas companies. If there's a spill, he's right there, and these companies get it. Cabot got a lot of bad press early on. Why? Because they were one of the first companies to start drilling, and the whole situation in Dimmock, where some people claim their water wells were tainted, they've still never proven that was the case, and they've done, I'm telling you, the DEP and the EPA and everybody was in there and testing those wells, and they didn't find any conclusive evidence that what Cabot was doing was to blame for that. And of course, then you talk to their neighbors who say, what, they had natural gas in their well 100 years ago. We've got stories in the paper of people lighting their water, 80 years ago and stuff like that. So, you can make your case either way. There's going to be people who are economically motivated to try to, get something out of it. I will say, from what I've seen, some companies, they almost are ridiculous the other way. Meaning, if someone says there's a problem, they go in and take care of it before there's even an investigation whether they were at fault. Which, to me, that might be a little bit going too far the other way. But I guess they just don't want to be accused of not being responsive, because there's been some cases where there was absolutely no evidence, and after they investigated said there is no way that caused it, but the gas companies were in there giving them potable water and taking care of the issue even though they weren't at fault. So I have seen a lot of that. But there's just, Cabot especially, because of what happened early on, I know from talking to my friend in the environmental consulting business, they are so strict with their employees as far as what they have to do and how they have to do it, the training that they go through now. But there's always gonna be accidents, you know, this is a construction phase, I always say, this is a construction phase of an industry that, you know, there's gonna be issues, and like any other industry, there's great operators, there's decent operators, and there's shoddy operators, and you can point to any industry, and that's probably the case, so. Dan?
One thing we have been hearing here a lot is that you can't get mortgages. The banks won't give mortgages if you have a gas lease on your property or gas lease involved. Is that, you know, from People's Bank, has there been any problem?
Well, I'm not a banker, but I do know that if you're trying to buy a property without the gas lease, and it's a decent amount of acres, not many lenders will touch that one. They want you to have the mineral interest. But if it's 3 or 4 acres and you don't have the mineral interest, that's not that impactful. They don't really care. So for the young couple that's trying to buy a house with 2 acres, it's not like they can't get it if the previous owner retained the mineral interest. But it does enter into the equation. Yeah, but again, I'm not a banker, I'm not a lender, I don't know, really where all that is currently, but I know I've heard some people talk about the fact that, they weren't able to buy, let's say, a house with 60 acres because the previous owner wanted to keep the mineral interest, and the bank said, not a chance. Now, it's okay if you're a cash buyer, of course, because it doesn't matter, but if you're trying to mortgage it, it can be an issue.
We've been hearing that the sign-on bonuses and royalties for later leases that are being signed now are dropped considerably. Do you know what they might be?
Yeah, that's a question, if you all heard it, have the signing bonuses and the royalties for people signing now, are they less than they were? And the answer is yes. Right now, you probably still sign a lease for $2,000 to $3,000 an acre, which is, a lot less than certainly it was at its peak. Because, and that's very common. That happens everywhere that the land grab happens. And that when companies get their acreage and they start to, put their units together and everything else, they really don't have the incentive that they did prior to pay a lot for a lease. And it does kind of come, hey, this is our offer, take it or leave it. That's definitely swung, the pendulum has swung more to the gas company's favor than to the landowner being in a position of strength, if you will, to bargain. The royalty percentage, yeah, it's a lot tougher to say, hey, I want 18 or 20% or I'm not signing. It's a lot tougher to do that now. It's kind of back to that 12.5%, 15% range for most of the companies. I haven't heard of anything super high on the royalty percentage side, because again, they don't have the incentive to have to do it. They've got land, they're developing land, they're making money, so.
I kind of feel like you might not know all the facts there, I don't mean to attack you. But,
Yeah.
just recently in the newspaper, there's a county out in Pennsylvania, I don't remember the name of the county, got $8,600 an acre for their mineral rights on their county land. And that was just this past week. And it's the second time they sold. The first time, they only got $5,800. So I think what's happening in Pennsylvania is people are in coalitions. And I think that here in New York, we're still in coalitions, and if we stay strong, we're gonna see $3,000 to $5,000 an acre.
Oh, you may. I can't speak to what's happening, and that might be Western Pennsylvania or something, and if it's a public land, they may have had some negotiating ability because they had a lot of land, but I can tell you that no one's getting $8,000 or $9,000 an acre signed, at least in Susquehanna County right now. That's what I was referring to, so.
I think, Bill, what you're saying too, and what we've seen is that these companies have consolidated their territories. Other companies aren't coming in. You don't have the competition now when you're trying to lease.
Correct.
You don't have that.
Correct.
So the company pretty much gets to dictate to you what you're going to get and what you're not.
That's correct, yep, and if you're not strategically important to them, they don't need it, they can work around you. That might be different if and when something opens up in New York State, then it's a land grab, then there's some competition, and you may see some higher prices. I can't prognosticate what's going to happen there.
Have you seen property values on houses drop? Because we've heard that because of gas drilling, the
No.
actual.
Not at all. No, I haven't seen that at all. I really don't, you know, there's people that are anti-gas that say, you know what, I'm gonna sell and move to somewhere, and that's fine. They've done that, and I think they've probably gotten a very fair market value for their property, if there's always someone looking to buy property. But I really can't think of any instances where I've seen someone say, well, gee, now my house is worth less because of something that happened gas-wise. But you had a question, sir?
On the picture of infrastructure, do you see an improvement with the upcoming Constitution pipeline takeaway capabilities?
You know, that is a limiting factor, and I've tried to remind clients of that for quite a few years now, and that everybody gets excited because they're drilling a well on their property and say, well, that's great, but do you have a pipeline anywhere near you? No. Well, then I guess you're not going to see any royalties for a little while. You know, infrastructure continues to be a limitation. They can get a gathering line, a midstream line put in, and all of a sudden it's full. And compressor stations obviously play a very important role in that. If there's a compressor station, they can get more in the gathering lines. So all that infrastructure, let's use that term, is extremely important. And it always seems to be playing catch-up. I know this winter, with the winter we had, a lot of the companies that have been doing pipeline work around our neck of the woods weren't working. So there wasn't a whole lot of pipeline being built. Now they're back at it and doing more. I'm sure the Constitution is one of multiple projects that will happen in the future. I don't know specifics of the Constitution other than, you know, that it is one of several out there, but I'm sure it'll help. But capacity is, and in my estimation, will continue to be a challenge and a limiting factor for how quickly people can develop. Because you can go out and poke all the holes in the ground you want, but if you don't have a way of getting your product to market, you're not going to get paid for it. It's that simple. And, you know, there are a lot of people getting drilled on to hold their land by production because of their lease, but they'll drill a well and then they'll move on to someplace else. And it'll sit there and be shut in until they get a pipeline near there. So.
As you said, you're not a demographer, and neither are we. But we get the sense that those who are opposed to gas are a very vocal minority. I'm wondering if you agree with that assessment, and also in Pennsylvania, those who disagree, do you see that their strength is increasing, decreasing? Are they quietly, grudgingly shutting up? Or how do you see those opposed to gas reacting at this point?
You know, there may be folks out there, and I just don't hear them in the circles that I hang in, but I got to tell you, it's, I think, increasingly difficult to be the vocal minority. It is definitely the vocal minority, but I think it's increasingly difficult to get any traction if you are that person and you're trying to say, oh, you know, the world's going to end because of natural gas and all those types of things. I just don't know if anyone listens anymore, you know what I mean? Because there's so many positives that people see now that it's awfully hard to come out against it and get a whole lot of traction or a whole lot of people to listen to you. There's always, you know, a few zealots that are going to continue to sound the alarm, if you will. That's fine. Everyone's entitled to their own views and thoughts and opinions, but I don't see hardly any of it, really. But I think it's because of the situation that we're in, it becomes very difficult, you know, and say, you know, natural gas is, you know, the devil incarnate, and people are receiving care at the new hospital or something. It becomes a lot harder to take that stance, I guess, and have anybody listen to it.
Bill, another thing that we hear a lot is that, I don't know if any of your clients, maybe you'll know, not been able to get insurance because of having a gas well or gas activities on their property. Is that true?
You know, I don't know. I have a close friend that's in the insurance business, and I could ask him, but I haven't heard that. I haven't heard any of my clients have that issue. So I can't believe it's too prevalent, or I probably would hear about it, because that's something that would be something that people will be discussing in length if there was a big issue. I'm not saying it's not an issue, but I have not heard if it is.
Well, another thing that we've heard is that if you have any acreage at all, it's a good idea to put it into an LLC. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. If I have any acreage, is it important to get in an LLC? In New York State, LLC is generally structured. In Pennsylvania, it's not. It's more the FLP, or Family Limited Partnership. As Rob can tell you, when it comes to legal stuff, it's really a situation-by-situation basis. And you can't go to a seminar and have someone say, everybody should have an LLC or an LLP or an FLP, because that's not the case. And there isn't an acres cutoff. If I've got X number of acres, I've got to have one. If I'm below that, I don't. It's really the family situation. A lot of clients that we've done family limited partnerships for, which is an entity to own the mineral interest, put the gas lease in that entity to get it out of the estate. But there's lots of folks that we just keep it simple because it's not necessary and don't do that type of thing for. So it's like anything else when you're doing planning. There's pros and cons to both. And what I would tell you is to get with a good estate planning attorney and let them look at your specific situation and go into it with your eyes wide open. Don't do it because your neighbor did it. And I always tell clients, just because your neighbor did it, don't think you need to do it. Even if you both have 100 acres, it doesn't mean your situations are the same. They could be dramatically different. I've got kids, he doesn't. I'm worried about what if my one kid gets divorced and he's not, or I don't really care, I want my kids to have it when I die, and he's more worried about the control and because he has a kid who's a spendthrift, or whatever. I mean, that's how planning works. So I would say just get the facts for the pros and cons of both. I'm not for or against. It's a tool in the toolbox. Doesn't mean that you're going to use it. Ma'am?
Is gas drilling considered, in Pennsylvania, is it considered a heavy industry?
I have no idea. I really don't know. I don't even know what the definition of heavy industry is.
I ask it because in New York State, or at least in our region, I don't know if it's the same down here, many of the towns are trying to put into their comprehensive plans or whatever, the definition of heavy industry and include gas in it. And I haven't seen a definition that includes it yet.
Yeah, I don't know.
Just thought maybe I'd get some fodder too.
Wish I could help. Sir?
I just wanted to say that in today's blog on natural gas now, or maybe with Montrose, that they had done a survey in Philadelphia and all throughout Pennsylvania where drilling is happening. And they said, the question was, who do you trust most on natural gas issues? I just want the people here to know that Josh Fox came in last.
I saw that.
You saw that?
Where did you come in, Vic?
Yeah. I just want to make sure Brad Pitt knew that.
It's interesting. You don't have to go far from areas where gas is prevalent to have, in Pennsylvania, you can go to Philadelphia and there's probably the preponderance of the population that didn't even know that natural gas was being drilled for in the state. I mean, you don't have to go far out of even Susquehanna County. I mean, you can go to Scranton, and those people really aren't that knowledgeable about what's going on in our neighborhood. They just aren't, because they're not affected by it. So they've heard of it, they see it in the newspaper, but they don't really know a whole lot. Trust me, they don't. They really just kind of on the outside looking in. So. But they are receiving, those counties even are receiving some of the impact fees. So, not a lot, but some. Yeah, Dan.
Bill, have you heard a lot of dry holes that they've actually drilled that aren't good wells that won't be reduced?
Some. I think they've really gotten good at the geology. I'll use Cabot as an example. I mean, if you look at the top producing wells, a lot of them are Cabot. And whoever their geologist was, that guy is probably sitting on a beach with a drink with a fancy umbrella in it right now, because they ought to have given him a really nice retirement, because they just got it right. They got acres that are absolutely off the charts in production, Now, some of that also has to do with, I see dramatically different business plans with companies. You know, a Carrizo or a Southwest, you know, they don't open the well up and let it scream like Cabot does and try to get everything they can as quickly as they can. They kind of, you know, turn it up to a certain volume, and they want it to run for a longer period of time. So it can be deceiving to just look at production numbers, because Cabot, man, when they drill a well, they want that thing just absolutely screaming wide open and getting what they can out of it as soon as they can. But at the end of the day, you know, the geology, it is important. There are areas where the depth of the Marcellus is thicker. There are areas where there's faults. Faults have become an issue. Sometimes they'll drill and they know that they've hit a fault. But I think they've gotten very, very good at the geology and being able to kind of ascertain before they drill, is this a good spot or not? But it doesn't mean that they're not fooled once in a while.
What's your experience or your client's experience with road traffic and road conditions? That's a common complaint.
Yeah, it is, and I jokingly say my wife sees trucks, I see dollar signs. She complains a little bit more when she gets behind one, but I see my kids' college tuition generally. But it's, you know, I'm not gonna lie to you, the traffic is increased. Truck traffic, I have to say, I think I have a greater chance of being killed by a 19-year-old texting driving a car than I do by a water truck. I really, they're not flying down the road or anything like that. They're very, you know, courteous, I think. If you're at a stop sign, they're going to probably wave you through because they know that you don't want to get behind them, you know, that kind of thing. But there's increased truck traffic. I mean, every day there's something going down the road on the back of a truck that I have no idea what it is. It's big and it's metal and it's going to a well site, you know. And if you're a truck driver, you want to talk about dealing from a position of strength for a job. It's amazing. So it's tough for local businesses who need a driver to deliver the lumber from the lumber yard. You know, it's tough to find a driver because they're driving water trucks, dump trucks, low boys, whatever, you know. So yeah, the roads, that's kind of a sticky subject in that where the municipalities have allowed the gas companies to fix the roads, you will never find a better road. Whether it's a dirt road or a paved road, they come in and they do it, and they do it right. I mean, the best roads that our county will ever see. Where the state is left to fix them, you know, our Department of Transportation isn't that great, and we do have a lot of roads that are deteriorated because they just haven't, you know, gotten around to doing it. I guess if they let the gas companies do it, they would have been paved a while ago. So I don't know how that delineation works as far as who they let do what, but we have some roads that are being resurfaced and are very nice, and others that are still in need of some repair. And I think a lot of that, in fairness, is it was a tough winter, just like here, you know, tough winter on the roads. So. But they're getting there. Anything else? I know you have a lot to cover tonight.
So you really feel, you know, I know my grandparents were from Montrose. I used to go down as a little kid all the time, and the sidewalks were always in disrepair. A lot of the buildings didn't look so great. The difference between then and now, just how do you feel about that? I mean, you've lived there for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I was born and raised there, and moved back there as an adult to raise my family. Again, pros and cons. There's increased traffic. There's things that have changed that will probably never be the same. And then some people will say, "Oh, it's not the sleepy little town it used to be." But it's not dramatically different that you say, "Oh my gosh, it's ruined," or "Oh, you know, it's a city," or "It's this or it's that." You don't see. You know, there's not a huge influx of people, so it's not like there's a lot of outside people that are now living there. A lot of the workers they're renting and they're working, but then they might be gone. They come in, they work, they're gone. Not a tremendous amount of, there's no increase to, it's kind of nice revenue in a way because it's almost like tourism. You know, what's the benefit of tourism? You get their dollars, but you don't have to pay for infrastructure for them because they're transient, if you will. Well, a lot of the gas company workers are that way too. They come in, you know, renting is, if you have apartments and those sorts of things, I mean, it's darn good business right now because rents are way higher than you could ever get from a local person. What's the downside of that? It's very difficult if you're a young couple to try to go rent an apartment right now, because you can't afford $1,500 or $2,000 a month for a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. But the gas guys can, so if you're a landlord, that's what you're getting. So there's a pro and a con right there. But the impact, I mean, you don't drive through the town and say, oh my gosh, look at all these new buildings, and they're having to build new schools or anything like that. I don't think enrollment in schools are actually down, not up, because there's not a lot of families moving in with kids and putting them in schools. There's some, but not a lot. So it's not changed in that way. Still the same local people. I think, once again, if you are getting some royalties and you can fix up your property, that's a nice thing. So people's properties look a little nicer in some ways. You can drive by and say, oh, there's somebody getting gas royalties, because look at their place. It never looked like that before, you know. It's kind of a joke, but it's good.
With the numbers that you put up on the screen before, do you have ability to comment on the depletion rates?
No, I really don't. I don't consider myself an expert in that area. Again, I think it's going to vary by company and by how they drill and how they produce the gas and take the gas out of the well. But it's definitely there. Royalties vary every month just because of price of gas and because of capacity and what they've shipped and all that sort of thing. So it varies. Even if they're getting similar production, their royalties can vary simply by, again, the price of gas and how much they're getting into the pipeline in that particular month. So they can be all over the board. But from a depletion, you know, it's definitely an issue, and they tell you that, and you know that, and in the first few years it's going to be higher, and then it's going to taper off. But once again, I think the real surprise is, not surprise, but revelation has been, it depends on how the company does their business. A Cabot, you're going to see a bigger depletion because you're getting, you know, that well slamming for the first year or so. They're really letting it rip, and then it's going to deplete. You know, some of these other companies that they're not doing that, they're just taking, you know, a smaller volume up front, you may see a flatter line. So that's all I guess I can comment on with that.
One last question for me anyway. There's a lot of talk about crime rate going up. And last Sunday, I had the privilege of listening to a radio show at 7 o'clock at night that was put on by the Antis here in New York. And they said that rape is up 300% in Montrose, childhood pregnancies up 250%, robberies up 200%. Have you ever heard of anything like that down there or anywhere?
Well, let me address all that. I've not seen any cases, and I have friends that are in local law enforcement, state troopers, you know, sheriff's department, all that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty sure I would hear about it. We actually had a tremendous string of burglaries in and around Montrose this winter. My mother's house is one of them. I had to go in and, you know, take care of it because she lives in Florida in the winter. They were local kids. It wasn't gas related, none of them. I mean, these 3 kids did 30 burglaries, but they were local kids. And you know what it was? It was drug related. They were looking for money for drugs. So, rape and all that kind of stuff, I haven't heard of a single instance of that. So, you know, I guess if you had none and you had 1, you could say it's up a pretty big percentage. And percentages, you know, numbers can be deceiving. You know what they say about statistics, you know, they can make them look like whatever you want, but now I have heard none of the other, but, and the burglaries, as I said, were all local folks. And, you know, interestingly, you know, some of the guys, especially the welders, you know, you get guys coming from Texas, they're union pipe fitters from Texas, and they can be a little rough, but I gotta tell you, someone must educate these folks on the importance of them assimilating in the community, because you can walk into McDonald's and there's a good chance that one of them's going to hold the door for you, or he's going to say, hey, why don't you go first, you look like you're in a hurry. I can't tell you how many times stuff like that has happened, and it really takes you back. You're thinking, oh boy, you know, just, you know, you judge a book by its cover, you look at him, he's a little rough looking, he's dirty, he just came off a job site, but I got to tell you, they're polite. And I think a lot of that, quite frankly, is they're from the South. I mean, and people are raised that way, you know.
Republican states, good Republican.
Exactly.
A moment ago, you mentioned tourism. Do you have any feel about how the tourism industry is doing? People who are involved in the tourist industry in your area, or the number of tourists that are coming through the area? Any
You know, I
insight to
don't,
that?
I don't think tourism is that big a deal in our county to begin with. There's some bed and breakfast and stuff like that, but those places aren't renting generally to some gas folks anyway, so they're still, you know, able to take in the people that are passing through to see the fall foliage or something, but tourism isn't a big issue in our area, I don't believe anyway, so I don't think there's been any, if there's been negative impact, I'm not aware of it. There certainly could be, but I don't know. All right, one last question right there.
Okay, I've read that there are quite a few shut-in wells in Susquehanna and Bradford counties. Like, one figure I saw was 1,300 wells. From your experience with your clients, are you discovering that a lot of your clients, or to your general knowledge, have wells on their property that are not producing because the companies have shut down production?
I would say there are some, I wouldn't be the guy to ask, you know, to even, I would never even hazard a guess if they said, well, how many of your clients have wells that are shut in versus are producing? I really couldn't put a number on that. Do some have that? Absolutely, because that is a strategy of a lot of the companies to say, hey, we're gonna hold this lease by production. We know we need to do something, or we need to develop it, we wanna see what's here, and we know that there's not a pipeline nearby for another 18 months or whatever. But, you know, I can't tell you the strategy of how these companies set up their drilling schedules and lay out their units and all that kind of stuff, but there's certainly an art or a science to it, and once again, I'm sure you could line up 4 companies and they all do it a little bit differently. But there's, as far as numbers are concerned, or a percentage of wells that are shut in, I'm not the guy to ask, I really don't know. I'm sorry.
As a financial planner, your percentage of customers or clients are probably mostly farmers and quarry guys and loggers. Is there any percentage that's of landholders, environmental treatment?
You mean other clients that
Are
say,
against?
I'll have nothing to do with it, there's no drilling on my land, I'm against it?
But they're getting royalties?
Oh, but they're getting royalties. I would say it's a you know, very, very small percent. Maybe a couple percent out of 2% out of 100, maybe, from a standpoint of folks that just say, I don't want any part of it. Generally, if they don't want any part of it, they're not receiving royalties because they didn't sign. And you do bump into, once in a while, you bump into someone that just says, listen, I think this is bad, I don't want any part of it, I'm not gonna sign a gas lease. I've run into a couple of those folks, but not many. And again, not to say that it's wrong, that's just the way it is. There's just not a ton of them out there, I guess, because most people aren't in a position where they can, you know, not look at the economic side of things. We've found that, you know, a lot of gas companies are very willing to do, you know, subsurface only leases, and work with the landowner to say, I want to be able to pick where the pad is and that kind of thing within reason, if it is on the surface. But there's a lot of folks that did subsurface only, so they just feel, hey, if they want to go under me, that's fine, I just don't want anything on my land. So I would say it's minority, if that's what you're asking.
Do you see landowners getting override royalties for hosting a well pad, well site?
You know, they do pay them. I'm not sure exactly how that works. They do pay them for a pad and of course for pipeline going across their land and that sort of thing. And they're all kind of add-on items, if you will. It's not a lot. And I know I've talked to people that said, well, I think I messed up because I could have had a pipeline on the back part of my property. It really wouldn't have bothered me when they told them I wouldn't accept their offer. And they just, you know, they went to my neighbor and he did. And so I didn't get it. You know, that kind of thing happens. But it's not a lot of money. It's not game-changing money like the royalties. And the same thing with the signing bonus. You know, everybody gets hung up on the signing bonus. Oh, I got $4,000 versus $3,000. That's great, but that's one time. You know, focus on the royalty. That's where the real dollars are. So. All right, folks. Well, I appreciate your time.